You are listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin. To master a higher frequency for new state of mind. Once you walked in a forest of splendor in which everything you did and everything you thought was aligned. It is possible at this time to begin to return to the old knowledge. Intuitive healer and manifester Julia Griffin is here to talk about this unique time in history when all sentient beings, animals, plants, trees, and the earth are intent on creating this change. The wolves awakened her to the most incredible light, which opened gifts and brought knowledge that she longs to share. You are creators, and you are born to be creators of beauty, possibility, and joy. Join Julia on a journey into a beautiful and magical world where amazing possibilities exist. Let us help open the door. The Power of Inspiration and Awakening with Julia Griffin starts right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Julia Griffin, and you're listening to The Power of Inspiration and Awakening on Transformation Talk Radio. Be with us for the next hour and let us help you experience a higher vibration and a new state of mind. Welcome to the show. Today's show is about the insights and interesting points of view that Anyaa McAndrew has for us. She's a wonderful guest. It will help you to work with the energies and understand more of what's going on. So let me tell you about Anyaa, and let's get to work raising our vibration. Anyaa McAndrew is a seasoned psychotherapist, an ordained high priestess, and a spiritual guide residing in Western North Carolina. For the past 21 years, Anyaa has created and facilitated several versions of priestess initiation work in the United States and internationally, integrating a lifetime of spiritual and therapeutic work with women. Anyaa is also a shamanic astrologer, an imago couples therapist, a trauma specialist, and a sacred sexuality educator. Steeped in the feminism of the early 70s, Anyaa now calls herself a divine feminist and enjoys bringing her 44 years of wisdom and experience to facilitating the personal journey and the couple's journey, co-leading grand adventures around the world, and working on her own inner and outer sacred marriage. She can be contacted through her website, goddessontheloose.com. Welcome, Anyaa. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Julia. It's good to be back with you.
It's always so fun. It's always so fun and so interesting to talk to you. I think you have some viewpoints and insights that no one else does. So everyone listen. So could you share your interpretation or your feelings of what's happening at the moment in the world? It's a little crazy.
It's a little crazy. Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's fascinating too. And the first thing I'll say is that, we have front row seats and it's a participatory show at the same time. And it's actually a really grand time to be alive if we can really wrap our heads around it, wrap our hearts around it, really embody what's going on. And, when I was thinking about this, I decided that I would try to really help us look at it from a couple of different perspectives. The first perspective I think that is really important is that we look at it from a three worlds perspective. And this is a shamanic way of looking at things. So when you look at the three worlds that we're all involved in, we have the heaven realms or the celestial realms, right? And that would be, the astrology of what's happening. That would be the ascension timeline that people are talking about, that spiritual teachers have been talking about for a long time, making a big leap in consciousness, building the new world, those kinds of ideas, which are really celestial ideas. They're really heavenly ideas. They're ideas for moving into a really positive future that is more spiritual. right? And then we also have, yeah, and everybody, you know, I think we all want that, but you know, how do we get there? And then there's, you know, this third dimensional reality, right? And life is crazy. And, you know, as Marianne Williamson said, it's as if the world is having a nervous breakdown, right?
Yes.
And we are. We actually are. Things are really uncomfortable. They're scary. The future feels really uncertain. It's very difficult to see that ascension timeline from where we are right now. And that people are really at odds with each other. There's a lot of polarity. And everybody seems to be really edgy and reactive and anxious and fearful, and all of that is going on at the same time. It's not only the nervous breakdown, but I really think it's a dark night of the soul that Andrew Harvey has talked about forever.
And there are a lot of pieces to this. You know, you said in the beginning, and I think people have forgotten this, we were all excited when we went into, you know, it's the age of Aquarius and everything's going to happen. And, you know, on some level, I think we remembered that this was something we really wanted to be here for. You know, and that was what you said, we have a ticket to the big event. But I think people have forgotten about their ability to participate in it and to raise their vibration, and how that is participating, is raising your vibration and putting out the love frequency.
Yes, exactly. And then, you know, there's another world, and that's the lower or the underworld realm. And that's really important to take a look at also, because it's informing everything else. Okay. It's definitely informing our third dimensional reality more than the celestial realm is at this point. That's at least for the collective. And, you know, this underworld realm is a realm that a lot of us don't want to take a look at. We don't want to look there. But what I want to encourage everyone to think about is that when you look at what's dark, when you look at what's nefarious, when you look at some of these deeper agendas that are happening, that allows us to shine light on them so that they actually cannot continue to happen. So there's a great deal of awareness that can come from looking at what's happening under the surface of things, okay? The activities that are happening sort of behind the scenes that are starting to come forward, okay, that are difficult for us to really understand. It can be disturbing. It can feel like we're not in control, and that there's some other agenda that's in control, and that there is stuff that's been happening beneath our noses for a long time. And so those kinds of things are really important in terms of what many have been calling the Great Awakening. We have to be able to see what has been happening beneath our noses for a long time. And if we can do that, if we can look, and sometimes it's going to bring up triggers, it's going to bring up trauma triggers for us. I'm a psychotherapist, so I understand that. My practice has been booming in a certain way since this whole thing started. But it allows us, there's another thing that this allows us to do, and it allows us to really process what's been happening underneath our noses for a long time. And I'm talking, one of the things that really drew me into really looking at all of this was trauma. And the fact that for years and years, I had women coming into my circles, my priestess circles, and women coming into my practice that had been ritually abused. And one of my specialties has been trauma, and it's been sexual abuse, but I didn't quite understand this ritual abuse stuff. And And so I went hunting for what this was really about, and I started to understand what was happening. And then as this whole last 6 months began to unfold, I went even deeper than that. And so those of us who are willing to look at these sort of nefarious agendas, and they're manifesting in all kinds of ways, are then holding space for those who cannot yet look at it. But I'm expecting that we're going to have more and more and more disclosure as time goes on. So as we have more disclosure, those of us who've already looked and already seen and already investigated and already processed get to hold space for those who are awakening to it for the first time and maybe have been in denial about it. So that's the lower or the underworld realm. And, you know, it can be really tricky to hold all those places at the same time. I'll just let you speak if there's anything you want to say about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, so for rephrasing about this, some of the darker magic, some of the darker happenings that are in the world, we can't pretend like that's not going on. And if we're willing to research it and really look at the energy behind it, and I'm not going to say a lot, I'm just going to say you're going to bump into that energy if you really research it. If at that point we start sending light to it, then we will eventually turn that energy off or transmute it into a higher form, right?
Yes, and that, you know, that is the job of some people. Some people, it's their job just to hold their own vibration high, because their work may be different than that, you know. So I want to, you know, get into what some of the different purposes, life purposes, or soul purposes, or
we can do that when we come
plans.
back.
Yeah,
because we're getting ready to go to break, so that would be a wonderful thing to talk about, our soul purposes at this time. So everyone, we've been listening to Anyaa McAndrew, who's talking to us about the state of the world, how we can understand it and evolve more deeply. You can find her at goddessontheloose.com. When we come back, we'll continue with this line of conversation, so stay with us. Let's go to break now.
Listen while you work. Streaming live on any device. Tune in to the Transformation Radio Network. Visit transformationradio.fm.
Are you ready to shift your current beliefs about death? From debilitating pain and loss? Follow Angie Corbett Kuiper as she shares that through choice, present moment awareness, and keeping an open mind. Anything is possible, even in death. Tune in to Beyond Proof Radio with Angie, redefining death and loss, every first Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com. For more, visit BeyondProof.com.
We remember a time when you could simply form a thought and it would manifest. The harmony was forgotten, but it is returning now. The Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin on TransformationTalkRadio.com each second and fourth Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll take you on adventures through the heart and spirit, exploring who we once were. This intuitive healer studied under the guidance of wolves, learning from their wisdom to master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Visit OneTrueSelf.com.
Inspire, create, empower. Only on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm Julia Griffin at OneTrueSelf.com, ONETrueSelf.com, and you're listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening on Transformation Talk Radio, where you can experience a higher vibration and a new state of mind. Today we're talking with Anyaa McAndrew, and we're going to talk about what's going on at this time. We're going to begin and pick up with the different purposes that those of you who are on higher vibrations, and you are because you're listening to this, what your purpose might be in the world. So, Anyaa, can you tell us about that, our different purposes?
Absolutely. So there are some of us that are really called to speak about some of these atrocities and to, call them out, to really call them out. And I would say that, that's we're all called in some ways to be spiritual warriors right now, but I would say that's definitely a warrior role. And, even more than that, there are others that are actually on the front lines as warriors. And there are a lot of rescues of children going on right now. And, there are people that are doing it above the surface of the earth. There's also people that are doing it below the surface of the earth. There are a lot of trafficked children. And so, that's just one of the atrocities I think that we're dealing with on the planet. But that warrior job is an important job. And some warriors are called to do grid work. They're called to stand guard as psychic protectors. Some are called to really support the warriors and the protectors. And that would be, the role of, let's say, sending protection or sending light. And some are meant to be healers for those who've been wounded. And I would say that I'm in that role. I'm also a warrior in that I'm okay with pointing out and talking about some of the things that are happening. I have to be careful about who I talk to because there's a lot of programming that we're working on clearing right now. And this programming has been with us for, I'm going to say, at least 6,000 years. During the time of patriarchy, it's been with us. And so that programming for a lot of people is not cleared. And in other words, they're reinforcing that programming maybe by watching, the news a lot or reading the newspapers or reading articles online that are really promoting the same kinds of agendas that we're really trying to clear. And they're doing it in various ways. And I won't go too much into that. But then there are those who are meant to wage peace in the streets and in the trenches. Now, we're seeing a lot of conflict out in the streets right now, so I'm not sure that the peace bearers are really welcome at this time, and it can be very difficult on the streets right now. And I for one am not interested in going to any of the protests or any of the activities that are happening on the streets because I think it's a really dangerous time. But then there are other roles. There's the role of teaching about what it means to unify, to be in unity consciousness, to join together, to co-create a new earth. I would recommend for those of you who have not seen the movie Thrive 2, that you go online, and I think the website is www.thrive, on.com. I think you can find it there. And it's a 3-hour film, so you can rent it. I think you can rent it for about $10. It's a beautiful film. And it covers some of these things I'm talking about. For instance, someone who's called to be an engineer or an inventor or has been an inventor, those would be also the builders of the new world. And there are lots of inventions and technology in all kinds of areas that Thrive 2 talks about. So they're really focusing on building a new world. And then there are some who are simply meant to bring more love and understanding to their families and extended families, to help bring some calm and some peace into their tribes, into their worlds. And then there are others that are out there rescuing and protecting the animals in the natural world. And, you know, in addition to that, there's those who are planting gardens and are just getting healthier. And, you know, we've had this pause that has really helped us in a lot of ways. It's also caused a lot of damage, but I think there's been an opportunity for us to all take back our own abilities to heal ourselves. And it's really prompted us to get prepared and to be more self-reliant and to be less of a consumer culture and more of a culture that takes responsibility for ourselves.
I definitely
So
agree
you might
with
have some things to add to that.
Yeah. Well, obviously, if we have more time and we're not out buying things, we have more time to focus on things like light and love and peace. And for people who have not found their gift yet or what they're supposed to do, just that and gardening or staying outside and feeling happy, that actually raises the frequency of the world. So don't think that, you know, you're not doing anything. It's a huge thing to do, and it's very helpful. And I think the other thing we can think about is that we're connected to other people who are doing the same thing.
Exactly. And it can allow us to feel unified rather than fighting within ourselves and with each other and marginalizing each other and polarizing with each other. And, you know, I think that one of the messages that I want to put out is that humanity has suffered long enough. You know, we have been, you know, in lots of ways, we've been prisoners. You know, many talk about this being a prisoner planet. Many talk about, you know, slavery on this planet. There's been so much of that. And I would say that every single one of us has had at least, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 lifetimes of suffering. You know, many, many more than that, most probably. And that suffering has taken many, many forms. And we've suffered long enough. Suffering is still really a part of what's happening on this planet. But our humanity and our divinity, if we can hold both of those at the same time, our intention is to bring heaven to earth eventually. You know, the Aquarian age, the light side of the Aquarian age would be to honor our humanity. And of course, the dark side of the Aquarian age, which a lot of people don't talk about, is AI, it's artificial intelligence. And that's what we have to really be careful of right now, is that we don't give over our sovereignty to that dark side of the Aquarian age, where, you know, some of those nefarious agendas is to basically appropriate us, to you know, in a way that we would. Yes, in a way that we would lose our real humanity and we would become something other than who we are as a human species. So there's, you know, if we can just hold that vision that, you know, I want to say that we really are, my sense is that we are at the deepest point of polarity, the most extreme point of polarity that we have ever been. And one of the spiritual teachers that I spend a lot of time, I look at her material. Her name is Lisa Renee. I don't know if you know who Lisa Renee is, but
I do know who you're
she really
about,
is she's a galactic grid worker. She keeps a pulse on what's happening. She's not even a channel. She just knows these things. She just travels. And one of the things that she said recently is that not only are we at the end of a 36,000-year cycle or 26,000-year cycle, we are at the end of 12 times 12 26,000-year cycles, which is 360,000 years, which is as far back as the type of human DNA that we are has been found. 360,000 years. Can you imagine? I mean, we can't imagine that, really.
No wonder it feels so intense.
Yes, it's very intense. So, If we can understand that this is the bottom of the Kali Yuga, this is the bottom of that dark night of the soul, and we can hold what Lisa calls the 0 point, or hold neutral, and not go into polarization, to keep our frequency as high as we can while we're still keeping ourselves psychically protected. We're clearing our field on a regular basis, and that can be really easy. You know, we can just imagine a light starting at the top of our heads, with a you could say even a screen, you know, a light, sort of a screen with a light in it that just catches everything, and we just move it through our field. And we do that a couple times a day. It's so easy to do that.
So I'm going to paraphrase. For 0 point, if you think about it, it's like something that you usually react about. You go to your heart space, or you go to your inner self, and you decide you're not going to have the same reaction. You're going to stay grounded. You'll stay within yourself. And a different energy comes in, and you're neutral about it. It's like instead of moving all over the place, you're aligned. That's a really simple example of it. But we'll talk more about 0 point and the astrology and many of the things that are going on now. We've been talking with Anyaa McAndrew about the state of the world and how we can evolve at this time. When we come back, we'll continue this discussion. So let's go to break now.
Get empowered. Transformation Talk Radio.
You know, marriage is not always easy, but skills that improve communication go a long way. Tune in to the Relationship Rehab Show, Recovering Happiness in Your Love with Nancy Landrum and Dr. Pat each month on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Nancy is an author and teacher empowering couples to create and sustain loving marriages. Learn to listen, speak, and handle conflict with respect so your love can flourish. To learn more about Nancy and her work, visit nancylandrum.com.
What would you do with the power of community? How do you create your own rituals? Tune in to Living Your Gifts with me, Susan Huff, Ancient Applications for Modern Times, the second Wednesday of each month on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Our lives begin with the stories we are told and the stories we tell ourselves. Storytelling is the key. To learn more about me, visit livingyourgifts.com. That's livingyourgifts.com.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Griffin at OneTrueSelf.com, ONETrueSelf.com, and you're listening to The Power of Inspiration and Awakening on Transformation Talk Radio, where you can experience a higher vibration and a new state of mind. We're having a very exciting conversation with Anyaa McAndrew about this particular point in time and space. We're talking about 0 point, how you can evolve, how you can bring light into your field, and make this a really wonderful time for yourself. So, Anyaa, do you want to go back to 0 point and duality? We know there's a lot of duality.
Sure.
And I think you were saying that when we're at 0 point, we can get through that.
Yes, it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't see the duality all around us, but we're in the center. We're in the center of the wheel. And we can hold neutral from that center point and understand that there's a lot of duality happening around us, a lot of polarity happening around us. But our intention is to basically keep our frequency as high as we can, to keep ourselves psychically protected, because there are lots of light workers right now that are experiencing, if they are perceived as a threat to these negative energies that are being, let's say, that are battling for our consciousness, that they are experiencing different kinds of effects from, and you could say, psychic attacks. So it's really helpful. If you can go to Lisa Renee's work, she has something called a 12D shield, and you can actually find it online. And it's a very simple tool for shielding yourself, shielding your light body. And you can probably do it in a couple of minutes once you learn how to do it. And I think that is a really helpful tool at this point to have, and to regularly clear our field. And I talked about a tool for doing that. And also to do some shadow work that, we're all meeting our own personal, you could call it our own personal Armageddon. Okay. This is not necessarily about collective consciousness, but it could be that we have someone in our field that we're in conflict with, that we have some kind of issue that's happening for us that is confronting us in some way. And if we can see that as our own personal Armageddon, and to work through that and be able to integrate, see that as our own shadow aspect, and to integrate that, to love that into wholeness, then we'll be doing our own personal work, which then will ripple out into the collective and allow us to raise our frequency and to basically come into a higher level of consciousness overall, which is what we all need.
Yeah, a question here with it. Shadow work, that's when we become aware of parts of ourselves or parts of our lives that maybe are not in alignment with the whole or the inner self.
Yes, they're parts of us that are out that may seem outside of us or may seem outside of our awareness. And so oftentimes, especially in this time, and let me just talk about as we all awaken, as humanity awakens, what's happening is that the lower underworld energies that have been in control for a long time of our realm are now no longer in control in the same way, right? So as things become cleared on a deeper level of the earth, then what happens is these shadow energies come to the surface. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing an emergence of shadow energies because they can't work in the dark anymore. So they're coming out into the light. And what some of your listeners may be observing is that things seem to be getting worse. But in actuality, they're not. They're just coming to the surface. And we all know about that phenomena. When something is no longer able to operate in the dark. It's like moving all your furniture away from the wall. You can suddenly see all the dirt, or putting a really bright light in the living room. Exactly. So, so those
asked me, what's the point in the duality? And I said, in my experience, if you're co-creating or you're manifesting, duality becomes extreme before you move into the next higher frequency if you're working on this.
Yes. And it's not that we won't have different kinds of dualities when we move to a higher dimensional frequency. I think that duality is something that will be more subtle. It'll be a lot more subtle. It'll be just a matter of choices, right?
What would
be just a matter of choices rather than right. Exactly. It'll be, well, do you want to create with fuchsia, or would you rather create with turquoise? They're contrasting, right? They're contrasting, but they're not at odds with each other.
No, because we want the experience of duality.
It allows us to have creativity. So I think there's a misperception around duality. And when I say we're at the most extreme point of duality, it's like it's the most polarized, it's the most conflictual, right? And that's going to enter into our personal realm. But if we can see that entry into our personal realm is our own personal work with our shadow, then we can use it to our advantage. We can use it to raise our frequency.
Yes, that was perfectly said. So let's talk a little bit about the astrology. I know we have a full blue moon on Halloween and lots of things going on in the next month or two. And I know you're a good astrologer.
I would say that overall, the astrology is basically Pluto, Saturn, magnified by Jupiter. Okay, that we can all take a look at that. And if those of your listeners who don't understand those three planets, so Pluto is underworld. Okay, Pluto has to do with deep, powerful transformation, feeling at the effect of. It's a kind of pressure for us to step into our power. Okay, and so there's going to be power struggles all over the place because those who are anti-life are going to be using Pluto in their own ways. And those who are for life on this planet and are not anti-life are going to be stepping into their power in their own way that has to do with promoting life. And then there's Saturn. And Saturn you could say Saturn is the rules. It's a middle world planet, and it has to do with the rules. It has to do with the law. It has to do with the way things have always been. It has to do with middle world reality or 3D consciousness. And so when you have the way things have always been confronted by Pluto, which are these underworld sources of power and transformation, and then you have Jupiter, and Jupiter is also a middle world planet, and it tends to exaggerate or expand anything that it's connected to. So if you look at all three of those together, that Saturn and Pluto polarity, the way things have always been, and Pluto, which wants to basically take it apart and destroy it. And then you look at Jupiter, which exaggerates the whole thing or expands the whole thing. You've got quite a storm happening. And some people have talked about this as the Third World War, that this is a war over consciousness, that this is a war over this is a war over our ascension or our further enslavement. So if we look at it that way, we know that it's absolutely essential for us to hold a higher frequency. Because if we drop down into engage in that lower frequency too much of the time, and sometimes we have to go there in order to be able to see what's actually happening in the lower world. Right? We have to be able to see it.
Yeah, we have to
in order to be able to transmute
it feels the way it feels. Yeah.
Exactly. But we don't want to spend too much time there, which is, it's one of the reasons a lot of us don't watch the news. We may, seek out other kinds of things, just to see what exactly is happening behind the scenes. But we definitely want to keep our frequency high and to keep at that neutral zero holding point so that we can actually see without being pulled into one side or the other. Because as soon as we get pulled into one side or another, we're in polarity. And there goes our frequency.
And so we're amplifying everything we don't want. It is very tricky.
Exactly.
I'll feel really happy, and I'll look at a written synopsis of the news, and I'll think, well, that's interesting. And then I'll go back and click on an article, and I'm like, I feel so tired. I don't know why. I'm like, it's because you clicked on the article. You know better than that.
Yeah, right.
But it is like a nightly news prayer. I don't think people realize that. If you think of millions of people coming together, watching the same negative images at the same time and hearing negative words, that's a prayer session.
Yeah, and we're reinforcing it. We're actually reinforcing it. So it's important to know what's going on, but it's important, I mean, some of my friends are looking at the mainstream news, they're looking at alternative news, they're looking at, both sides of what's happening here. We've got a huge political battle going on in this country. And, and then you go back to neutral, right? You go back to neutral, right. You clear your field, and you put out the vibration, or you put out the prayers that you want to put out. One of my teachers, a woman named Flo Aivia Magdalena, who 40 years ago, she's been a channel for a long time, and about 40 years ago, she channeled the story of Mary Magdalene, called "I Remember Union." You may be old enough to remember that, but if you hadn't, it's an incredible. If you have an interest in Magdalene, her audio version is just the most incredible love story. But anyway, I'm in her community as well, and one of the things that she channels some higher dimensional beings, and she channels all kinds of energies. But I really trust her channel because about a year ago she started talking about what was going to be happening, and the guide said that we were coming into the end of the free will experiment. Okay. In other words, that those who were promoting an anti-life agenda would no longer be able to promote that agenda. That agenda would be coming to an end. And the way that would be coming to an end would be that everything would begin to fall apart. All the old structures would begin to fall apart. Of course, that's the Pluto-Saturn effect that we're experiencing. Right.
We're seeing that now.
Yes. And then we would be moving into the beginning of the free heart experience. Okay. And that would be the choice to live in our hearts. Right? That would be the choice to live from our hearts. And
what a wonderful choice.
Yes, exactly. And that each one of us had a design, a spiritual design or a soul design, that would be a part of that. And, we talked about that a little while ago. So I think that's really lovely, that it's really about waking up to promoting life in all kinds of ways, and to end what we have been participating in on this planet, which I think has been a part of our programming. I think that, it's really important.
Is it part of our programming? Tell us more about that.
Well, I can tell you about my own history in terms of exploring all of this. And, I was raised as a Catholic. I went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic high school. And the versions of history just didn't make sense to me. They just didn't make sense to me. And, I began to notice as I paid more attention that, it was there were certain versions of history, but then what was happening behind the scenes was totally different. Right? So, and then I began to investigate and to grow an understanding around, our off-planet origins, our, ancient and modern subjugation as human beings as slaves, human trafficking, which is still going on, slavery, which is still going on, our propensity to victimize and to be victims. And I began to understand that there was something deeper happening for the human race. Okay, that we have a tendency to feel like we are less than as a human race. We have a tendency to beat up on ourselves. And that's part of the programming. That's really part of the programming. We're taught that we really are worthless, that we really are, and that's one of the things I object to about what's happening on the streets right now, is that we're still beating up on ourselves. We're still seeing ourselves as less than. We're still seeing that we created this, and we did. We participated in this, in creating this, but we've also been very highly programmed.
Right.
And we've been programmed by forces that we have not known about. We have not understood. And this has been going on for at least 6,000 years, and in some ways a lot longer. And once we begin to see that many of us call them the powers that should not be.
Great way of
when we
it.
see that we have been sort of corralled like cattle, So there's one, there's a very narrow kind of matrix that we're programmed into, and I often think of the Matrix movies because, what we can see now is that there is a matrix. There is a matrix. And once we understand that there is a matrix and we can actually wake up to that, then we can break out of it and we can stop beating up on ourselves and we can say, okay, let's stop doing this. Let's stop participating with this.
Yeah, because as you awaken, you stop having those feelings as strongly. Every time you awaken a little more, you're like, it's so strange that I feel this way.
Yes, right. And we don't have to, many people that I work with come to me with this sort of swing. I call it the codependent swing. And that codependent swing is, on one side, we feel less than, and on the other side, we feel better than. What is that? That's crazy. Why would in the same body, we go from, or in the same consciousness, we go from feeling less than to feeling better than. Mm-hmm. Why can't we, and I, any of your listeners who have that particular pattern, and I think a lot of us do, we feel less than, and then we compensate by feeling better than. Right. And we can't really hold feeling better than, so we go to feeling less than. But the way to work with that is just to bust ourselves and just to say, I'm not better than and I'm not less than. And to feel grateful for what it is that we have, the gifts that we have, the blessings that we have in our lives, and at the same time to feel our humility and our place in the world as not either better than or less than. But the problem is that we have been programmed to do one or the other. In other words, we've been programmed to feel better than certain populations, either classism, racism, whatever, nationalism, whatever, And then we've been programmed, depending on which one of those categories we might be in relation to another, to feel less than.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good way to balance that you just said.
Gratitude and humility. Just gratitude and humility. And, there are going to be times when it's okay to feel our specialness, but it's not specialness in relation to someone being more special than another, or someone being better than another because they have certain gifts.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that is it's not a superior or inferior kind of thing. It's about just being grateful for what it is that we have, for our own personal soul design, for our own personal mission.
Right. The individuality of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So is there anything that we can see for the earth or do for the earth, or is just connecting with the earth enough?
So one of the things I want to say that many people may not know is that these powers that should not be, the controllers, have for eons of time done all kinds of reversal programs and put technology into our earth that has been very damaging to the earth. Okay. And so one of the things, and that technology, that AI technology, is now being removed. Okay, which is a really good thing. It's a really good thing. And the reversals are being removed. And I think that's why we're seeing so much polarity and so much shadow coming to the surface, because they're desperate. They're really desperate. Yeah. And their resources are being taken away. And so the earth really needs us right now. You know, there are many people who say, oh, the earth's going to be fine. You know, it's humanity that's at stake. Well, it's both. It really is both. And one of the things that we can do is to join the team that is for the earth. And that means, you know, join with the earth, with Gaia, to support the animals, to support humanity, to support nature. And an easy way to do that is to simply feel ourselves rooted into the center of the earth. And one of the things that I was taught is there is an earth star in the center of the earth. So if you can just imagine that you're connecting with that earth star in the center of the earth, and that really is our base chakra, right? And if we can imagine that we have a tail, or we have a root, and we can just grow it down, and we can learn to do this pretty easily, pretty quickly. And I think even with the 12D shield meditation, there's a piece of that. There is part of doing that, of just growing ourselves into the earth, just rooting ourselves into the earth and finding that earth star, and just connecting with the mother. Just connecting with the mother and bringing some of her light back up.
So just
resonating with her.
Sending love and light. If we connect and exchange energy with the earth, we're doing something much bigger than what we think. Exactly.
And of course, being with nature is a part of that too, because we're connecting with the earth. So this is I think nature has been really showing us that she's actually healed a bit. I don't know about you. I'm in the mountains, and this spring and summer was just absolutely spectacular. And I don't think it was just because I was paying more attention to it, because I didn't have any place to go.
Right.
I think it was actually
so everyone
real.
who's listening, is an example that things are getting better. We're coming to the end of the show, and you can see that Anyaa has so generously shared so many techniques and so many insights that are absolutely fabulous. So I want to thank her for being with us today. Her website is goddessontheloose.com. You can go there and find her and find out about anything that's going on. You can sign up for my newsletter on my website, One True Self, onetrueself.com, and receive many tips about the energies developing on the spiritual level and finding a higher vibration. So thank you for tuning in to the Power of Inspiration Awakening show, where you can experience a higher vibration and a new state of mind. Please join me on the second and fourth Wednesdays of every month at 12 noon Eastern, 11 Central, and 9 a.m. Pacific. Have a great week, and I'll see you back here next time.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin, to master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Join us next time as Julia takes us deeper into the memory of the moments of light where transcendence and enlightenment emerge. The memory of the jewel of consciousness is always lived within you, to tap into waves of energy and create huge changes by imagining the beauty of the vision and desires that are hidden in the heart. Learn to find your way back to nature, beauty, and your own heart, which holds the secrets of your existence and future. To discover more about Julia's adventures, animal communication, and the teachings she brings to every show, visit OneTrueSelf.com. That's OneTrueSelf.com. That's ONE, TrueSelf.com.